Well, there's been a mixed reaction to Finance Minister Tito Mboweni's comments about state-owned enterprises during his budget speech. While announcing bailouts for several SOEs, Mboweni questioned whether South Africa still needs them. Eskom, SAA, the SABC, Denel have all requested state support. Eskom could receive as much as 230 billion rand over the next 10 years. Joining us to discuss this and more is COSATU President Zingiswa Lusi and Business Leadership South Africa CEO Bonang Mohale. Good evening to both of you, and thanks very much for coming through. If I may start with you, Mr. Mohale. I mean, a lot of people were rather measured, you know, in how they reacted to the budget overall. But you spoke in rather glowing terms about the speech, with words like, you know, it was well adjusted, sensible, reassuring, and so on. What made you say those things? So, every leader is a product of her or his context. The context that the honorable, it's wonderful to say honorable again, Minister of Finance Tito Mboweni was confronted with, was how to balance a number of conflicting priorities. How to stimulate economic growth after the 10 wasted years. How to reduce the debt that is reaching crisis levels. Thirdly, how to fix government institutions, including the more than 700 state-owned entities and state-owned companies. He does this at the moment where there's no money, the needs have grown, and service delivery protests are on average 3 a day every day. If you look at it in that context, he did an embarrassingly good job. And for that, as business, we support him wholeheartedly, including the fact that he is questioning whether we still need these state-owned enterprises. When you consider that a majority of them are trading recklessly, only a few are profitable. And amongst them, we count Transnet, Airports Company of South Africa, Telkom that has just been fixed, and Centec. We'll get into that in a short while. You were a lot more measured than him.
Look, on the question that has been posed by the minister, of course, COSATU's response is that we need state-owned enterprises. And it's good that as he posed that question, he then responded to the question by saying, if we don't, this is what then we should do. If we do, this is what we need to do. And he said we need to fix them. And we agree that it has been a mess. But at some point in time, these state-owned enterprises have been profitable. They have been not in a state that they are at. Something went wrong. They did not just happen overnight. Something went wrong. If it's in governance, people were corrupt, they looted, they mismanaged, misgoverned, and all of that. Now, the role of the state-owned enterprises does not go away. It's a responsibility in the development of the state, just because certain individuals have decided to take money out of it, you know, through corruption. So what we're raising as a federation is that there is still a need of the state-owned enterprises. What we need to do is to get rid of corruption, is to ensure that what the SOE is intended for, it does its work. So there is no question on whether we need them or not. Perhaps one other thing that we should be debating, Bonang, is many as they are, isn't it probably the time for us to look at each of it and say, don't we have a duplication on these SOE enterprises? Isn't there probably where you can take Transnet and make an example and put it together with SAA and see how do you deal with that? But also at the center of it is, how do you then balance that restructuring that you would be doing with jobs in those state-owned enterprises? So, and also we need to say, what is the role of state-owned enterprises in changing the lives of our people? What was its intended purpose? And let's separate people that have been corrupt. Let's take them to task. Let's separate people that have not been doing correct governance. Let's take them to task. For an example, the issue of ESCOM right now with the load shedding, the question that we've been asking as a federation, where are the technicians? Where were managers? There should be a shift that is preparing to hand over to another shift.
But you have members there. What are they telling you? Where are the technicians?
That's the question that we have also posed ourselves as a federation, to say the unions in these state-owned enterprises have also a role to ensure that on the day-to-day running of the production, there must be our own members in each and every. What is their response to the crisis that has engulfed, particularly in relation to the production, for an example, with the technical problems that the 6 units have gone through. We wake up to load shedding stage 2. Surely our understanding is that there must have been a shift that has handed over to another shift. There must have been maintenance schedule. If we have members who are artisans, if we have members that are engineers, what is their undertaking on what has happened, what has gone wrong?
If both of you agree that we need these SOEs in one form or the other, what do you believe has been the contribution or role of business to the state we're finding them in right now?
I must say it feels wonderful to agree with Comrade Labour as Comrade Business, because her language is exactly what I was going to say. So we have always known that ESCOM, for instance, is a crime scene. And today, Chairman Jabu Mabuza confirms that. When you consider that they've had 12 CEOs in 10 years, and that the board has paid itself 500 million in 10 years. This is industrial scale looting. So as business, we say there's always been a role for well-run, effective and efficient state-owned enterprises. There is a role for government, there's a role for labor, there's a role for business, there's a role for civil society. So what we need moving forward, first and foremost, is to stop the bleeding. We have been siphoning off, on average, 100 billion a year, every year, as a direct result of state capture. I'm not even counting corruption, bribery, stealing and cheating. Secondly, we need to ensure that we grow this economy. Thirdly, we need to ensure that we transform. This is Africa, but the leadership and this ownership of this economy is not broadly reflective of the demographics. Fourthly, we need to realize that the 10 wasted years have now resulted in a financial crisis. The last 2 for me, it's about creating jobs, but you do that by preserving the current jobs that you have under difficult circumstances, so that you can create more jobs, so that our own people can have their own self-esteem, self-respect. And then lastly, we have neglected education. We are the only country in Africa out of 54 African countries, 1.3 billion people, that became free from our colonial masters, and we did not purposefully improve the quality of our education. In fact, South Africa did the opposite.
Well, her organizations worry, if you take ESCOM as an example, for example, as an example, is the proposal that has been put on the table to break it down may result in job losses. And you're saying that one of the things we should ensure happens is that jobs are, in fact, grown.
Absolutely. But you see, ESCOM is a terminal case. 2009 has 32,000 employees. Today, 48,000 employees. We know, compared to similar-sized utilities, is probably a third too many. The same with SAA, DINEL, SABC, etc. Having said that, we also need to be conscious that when you are a manager in South Africa and you are getting 15% return on investment in an environment where CPI is 6%, when your global masters tell you that you need to reduce staff by 10%, as a South African manager, you need to say, here is not going to work. Because here what is keeping us awake at night is these stubbornly high levels of unemployment that then lead to increasing levels of poverty and increasing levels of inequality.
Well, you met with the ministers that are responsible for telecom issues, and from the statement you issued on that day, it didn't look like you achieved much, if anything.
We took the meeting on Sunday as the first towards a proper consultation on these issues. Remember, ours has always been that we are not going to disengage, and we appreciated what was put on the table. Of course, we're not going to be satisfied by one meeting. But one thing in that meeting that we have agreed to is that preserving of jobs, agreed that there's no privatization that is going to take place, and the fact that consumers must not be the ones that are going to take the hit of the high cost of electricity. Now, the issue of unbundling of Eskom, and I think all of us, we are in agreement even in that meeting, that saving Eskom is a priority. We must do that. Now, I'm also glad that Bonang is saying that preservation of jobs is at the center. Because what we're saying is, if we're going to restructure and bundle these SOEs, and you are going to lose the current jobs, who takes that pressure? It becomes government, because those people, when they are unemployed and the UIF is exhausted, they go to part of the social grants, adding on top of the 17 million that are currently recipients of social grants, when the tax base would have been reduced because less people are working. So we would not be dealing with the problem. So, and lastly, I must say that when we are talking about non-privatization, we're saying the problems at Eskom are also as a result of the private sector that has had a role to play inside Eskom. It is not only just those that are responsible to run Eskom. It was because of the corruption with the private sector that has had a role to play inside Eskom.
Look, we've run out of time, but here's something I want to ask both of you as well. In your statement after the minister's budget speech on Wednesday, you were happy that, among other things, he's going to reduce the public wage bill.
Absolutely, because we've got many issues, and Eskom is a good example because we have started there. Its debt is 491 billion, going up to 500 billion. It has now become permanent. There's no way it can trade itself out of this. Minister of Finance leads the way by saying we'll give them 69 billion per annum for the next 3 years. That's 150 billion. We know that what they really need in the next 10 years is 250 billion. So government is taking the pain.
You're not happy with
Business
that?
must also take the pain. Labor must also take the pain.
I prepare
and
to take
civil
the pain,
society must also take the pain. Because when Eskom goes down, the whole of South Africa goes down with it. Rating agencies are only looking for 4 things. They're looking for economic, financial, institutional strength, and susceptibility to major risk. The biggest risk we are facing now, contingent liability, is Eskom.
Your war talk doesn't suggest that you are prepared to take the pain.
Look, Putvuyo, in the health sector, we need doctors, we need nurses, we need police. So that's part of the public wage bill. So if we are having this, have we done an audit and said in this country, how are we going to skill, reskill, and upskill? Can we use those that are in, for an example, where we think they are more, and say we're going to reskill you and take you where we have less? We don't think that by just saying it's a huge wage bill and therefore people must be retrenched. Surely if we were to do a proper audit in terms of how the healthcare sector, education, and we'll be able to see the gaps. Because the population is still growing. So the argument that is huge, it's bloated, and therefore people need to go home, when in hospitals, in every second babies are being born, the population is growing, it means you still need to employ because you have less. So can we really look into, can we talk about numbers that we can really say, here, these are the heads, here, this is the, talk about real ratios, and then we will begin to really talk whether we really have a bloated public sector, or we are having certain people that are sitting and doing nothing when there's work to be done.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thanks to both of you for
and agree with
coming through. Please do agree. Agreed. COSATU President Zingiswa Lusi and Business Leadership South Africa CEO Bonang Mohale.